The prairie stretched endless beneath a bleeding sunset, sky ablaze with amber and bruised violet. A lone rider cut across the ridge, his silhouette sharp against the fading light, a man whose silence rode heavier than his shadow. His horse's hooves struck a steady rhythm, muted by the dry earth, as if both beast and rider had grown accustomed to carrying burdens that never lessened. His face, half hidden beneath the brim of a weathered hat, carried the kind of lines that came from more than age, lines carved by regret, by choices not spoken of. The wind shifted. He reined in, posture rigid, listening. At first it was only the ordinary music of the plains, cicadas, the hush of grass bending beneath the dusk. Then thin, sharp breaking, the cry of a woman's voice. A scream, strangled but unmistakable. It rose and fell, carrying on the evening air, and something inside him hardened. He had known this sound before in different towns, different nights, when the law failed and cruelty had no witness willing to stand. He had ridden away too many times. Tonight, the memory of those nights would not let him. He urged his horse down the slope, each stride fast but cautious, until the outline of a barn emerged below, squatting dark against the horizon. It was no welcoming structure. Boards sagged with age, its door chained shut as though to guard not hay or cattle, but something living. From within, a muffled pounding, fists striking wood, matched by a hoarse voice pleading for release. He dismounted slowly, boots sinking into dust that smelled of old manure and iron. One hand rested against the mare's flank, calming her, while the other drifted to the revolver at his hip. He didn't draw, not yet. A man who drew without cause was either a fool or already dead. He crouched ear to the rough planks. Her voice quivered close. "Please, someone." The timbre was broken but unyielding. Whoever she was, she hadn't surrendered. His gaze narrowed at the iron chain that bound the door. Rust crusted its links, but its strength was meant to last. He tugged once, testing. It rattled back, defiant. He could picture the kind of men who locked a soul inside such a place. Men who trafficked fear like coin. Men he had crossed before and left breathing, though they hadn't deserved it. His jaw set against the thought. The horse stamped behind him, restless, ears flicking toward the hills. He looked once over his shoulder. No figures yet. The plains were quiet, but quiet never lasted long. He returned his hand to the chain, eyes narrowing with purpose. He wasn't here by accident. The scream had found him because he could not pretend deafness anymore. He leaned close to the wood, voice low, steady as iron. "You're not alone." Then he straightened, shoulders squared, and placed both hands on the chain. Tonight something was going to break. The lock resisted like a stubborn beast, iron biting into his palms as he pulled. The barn shuddered under his weight, but the chain clung tight, as though it too wished to keep her imprisoned. Inside, the cries had softened to ragged whispers, as if the woman feared that hope itself might summon worse than silence. He pressed his shoulder against the weathered boards, the scent of dry hay and dust filling his lungs, and he drove himself forward. The wood groaned. Splinters bit his skin. Again he heaved, teeth clenched, until the rusted links rattled loose and the heavy door shivered open an inch. Moonlight seeped through the gap, silvering the shadows. He paused, listening. His heart beat with a cold patience born from years of waiting too long to act. No footsteps approached, no voices cut the night. Only her breathing reached him, shallow but alive. With a sudden jerk, he wrenched the door wider, and the dim interior yawned open before him. She was there, crouched in the straw, wrists bound by chains that had eaten into her skin. Her dress, once plain and decent, was torn to ribbons by confinement. Dirt streaked her face, yet her eyes met his with a fierceness that startled him. They were not the eyes of someone broken. They burned with a desperate defiance, as though the walls themselves hadn't beaten her spirit down. For an instant he felt pinned by that gaze, reminded of what he had once promised himself. Never again to look away. He stepped inside, revolver drawn now, its weight steady in his hand. The barn smelled of sweat and iron, an air of cruelty clinging to every beam. She flinched at his shadow, then steadied when she saw he carried no malice in his stance. His voice came low, gravel roughened by dust. I'm here to cut you loose. Her lips parted, the words escaping hoarse. They'll come back. You don't know what they'll do. The fear in her tone was not weakness, but knowledge. She had seen what men like her captors were capable of. He crouched, eyes scanning the iron shackles around her wrists. The lock was crude but vicious, meant more to humiliate than to hold. He tested the chain, tugging, calculating. I've seen enough to know, and I'm not leaving you in here. For a moment she closed her eyes, shoulders trembling, caught between disbelief and fragile faith. He waited, giving her space to breathe, though his own ears strained for the crunch of boots on dirt outside. Every second stretched thin, the air growing heavier with the possibility of discovery. Then, distant and faint, a sound cut the quiet, the tread of men returning. Rifles slung, their laughter ugly against the night. The cowboy's jaw clenched. He leaned closer to her, whispering sharp, urgent. Stay low. When this breaks, run to the dark. His hands gripped the chain again, muscles taut with resolve. The door he had opened was no longer just escape. It was the line between life and death. The first shot tore through the barn wall, splinters scattering like sparks. The woman cried out, ducking into the straw, chains clattering against the dirt. He dropped to one knee, revolver drawn, eyes narrowing into slits of cold fire. The night outside had erupted. Their return was quicker than he had hoped. 3 shadows moved across the threshold, rifles flashing in the half-light. Their laughter twisted into snarls as they realized the door hung open. The cowboy fired once, the pistol's thunder filling the barn. One man staggered back, clutching his chest, his rifle clattering to the ground. The others fanned wide, circling, their boots pounding like war drums against the earth. He rolled behind a stack of bales, wood thudding as bullets ripped through the hay. Dust and powder stung his throat, but his grip never wavered. She pressed herself against the wall, breath ragged, her wide eyes fixed on him. In their brief silence, she saw more than a savior. She saw a man who carried violence with him the way others carried faith. The gun wasn't an extension of his hand. It was an extension of everything he had been forced to become. She wanted to speak, to beg him not to die for her, but the words stayed trapped behind fear and awe. Another shot rang. He leaned out, aimed, and squeezed the trigger. The second outlaw fell, his body twisting into the dirt just outside. The third, the largest of the 3, charged forward, face twisted with rage. He crashed into the barn, rifle swinging, and in a single brutal motion, he seized the woman by her hair and dragged her upright. She screamed, the sound cutting through the thunder of gunfire, her wrists tearing against the iron that bound them. "Drop it!" The outlaw barked, pressing the muzzle of his rifle against her temple. His breath reeked of rot and whiskey, words thick with violence. The cowboy stood, pistol leveled, eyes locked on the man who used her as a shield. The air between them tightened, heavy with dust, smoke, and the weight of every choice. The woman's chest heaved against the barrel at her head. Her gaze darted to the cowboy, pleading but also steady. She searched his face and found no panic there, only a fierce calm that told her he had measured the moment, weighed every angle, and was ready to end it. The outlaw sneered, spitting blood from a split lip. "She ain't yours?" "Never was." His grip tightened, forcing her to her knees. The cowboy's voice came low, almost a whisper, yet carrying the weight of iron. "She's free now." The woman's eyes widened as his words sank in, not as comfort, but as command. Her body tensed, a silent pact forming between them. She twisted sharply, kicking back with sudden fury, catching her captor off balance. In that heartbeat of opening, the cowboy pulled the trigger. The gun roared, the shot flying true. The outlaw collapsed with a guttural cry, rifle slipping from his hands as he crumpled into the straw. The barn fell into silence, broken only by the hiss of gun smoke curling through the beams. The woman staggered back, clutching her wrists where the chains still clung, chest heaving as though every breath might shatter her. The cowboy stood unmoving, revolver lowered but steady, eyes fixed on the body until it no longer twitched. Only then did he holster the weapon, his breath slow and deliberate, as though exhaling years of buried weight. She sank to her knees, trembling not from weakness, but from the sudden absence of terror. Her eyes lifted to him. searching, as though trying to understand why a stranger had stepped from the dark to bleed for her freedom. He knelt beside her, rough hands working at the manacles. The lock finally gave beneath his persistence, and the iron fell away, striking the floor with a hollow clang that echoed like judgment. She rubbed her raw wrists, staring at the red marks as if they were scars of another lifetime. "Why?" she whispered, voice raw. "Why risk everything? You didn't even know me!" He met her gaze, unflinching, his tone quiet but unyielding. "Didn't need to." The answer was simple, stripped of poetry, yet it carried a gravity that settled deep within her. She understood then. It wasn't about her alone. It was about the ghosts he carried, the nights when he hadn't arrived in time, the faces that had slipped away into silence. Tonight he had chosen differently. Tonight he had not turned his back. Outside, horses whinnied in alarm, hooves scattering across the dirt. The rest of the outlaws had seen enough. Their shadows fled into the horizon, unwilling to test their strength against a man who didn't hesitate. The prairie wind rushed through the broken door, carrying away the last traces of gunpowder and blood. He rose and offered her a hand. She hesitated, then placed her fingers in his, allowing herself to be lifted to her feet. Together they stepped out of the barn, the horizon already softening into dawn. Pale light spilled across the fields, painting them in hues of gold. Behind them, the cowboy struck a lantern against the doorframe, oil catching quickly. Flames licked the dry wood, climbing higher until the barn roared with fire. He did not look back, but she did, watching the place of her torment turn to ash. They stood side by side in the cool morning air, shadows long across the dirt, the fire crackling behind them like a final hymn. The prairie stretched vast and silent, no longer a prison but a promise. He tipped his hat against the rising sun, words spoken low, not just to her, but to the empty plains and the memories that haunted him. She's free now. The woman's eyes closed, tears glistening, not of sorrow, but of release. The cowboy turned toward the horizon, a man bound by dust and silence, yet carrying with him the single truth he had forged in blood. Freedom was worth the fight, no matter the cost.